Thank you very much for this really wonderful introduction, and thank you all for being here. I really feel honored to be invited to this wonderful seminar series. And what I'm going to present here is the title is going to be Assessing Trustworthy AI, but what I'm going to present is basically the work of an international interdisciplinary group of researchers and the assessment process we are developing. It's called set inspection, and I'll give a few examples of what we did towards the end of the presentation. In the beginning, I'll introduce the context.
The microphone is here, so you can move in the room. Is here.
Oh, I see. You want me to
No, be comfortable in moving. It's the Jabra on the.
Okay.
It's here.
Okay, so right here.
What is that?
Okay, so. Okay, so assessing trustworthy AI. The first question, of course, with my philosophical context was, what is AI? And this is far from trivial because there have been given a lot of definitions for AI over the past 50, 60, 70 years or so. And what I brought here is a Wikipedia definition, which is a very, very general one. And the reason is that I thought this is insightful in the sense that it's a kind of common sense, or it's supposed to be a common sense definition. And it says, artificial intelligence is intelligence demonstrated by machines as opposed to the natural intelligence displayed by animals, including humans. This is in itself very interesting because right in the beginning, the idea was that artificial intelligence is kind of simulating human intelligence. And kind of this is kind of saying, no, there is a difference here, which is kind of remarkable, I would say, 2020. And then it goes on, AI research has been defined as a field of study of intelligent agents, which refers to any system that perceives its environment and takes actions that maximize its chance of achieving its goals. So this is a very general definition, but I want to point to the fact that the second sentence already sounds pretty similar to what humans do. It perceives the environment, it takes actions, intelligent agents. So there is some sort of I mean, there are concepts used that are normally used for human beings, and there is some need to reflect on these concepts, I would say. But this is just a general definition to get us started. And all sorts of AI systems are being used in a broad range of fields. I have just a few examples from healthcare. I could have chosen different ones. I could have chosen service context, business context. So robot surgeon, mental health, use of AI in brain imaging, and a social robot assisting patient taking medication. These are just a few examples. As I said, it's in all sorts of contexts. AI technology is being used. What's central is that we somehow trust the technology. I mean, in medicine, this is obvious, but this is also relevant in other contexts. So what is trust? Again, some definitions. Trust, the assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. And to trust, the Cambridge Dictionary says, is to believe that someone is good and honest and will not harm you. This is something like when we talk of people good and honest and will not harm you, or that something is safe and reliable. And this already sounds pretty like technology. And this, I think, is also remarkable that the safe and reliable is already put in there in the sense of we don't just trust people, we also trust technology, artifacts, whatever. So, especially when it comes to humans interacting with robots, there has been some research on what it is that what the factors are that are relevant for trust development, that are relevant for humans developing trust in technology, in robots in this case. And there has been a meta study by Hancock et al. And they have developed 3 fields in which trust development is relevant. The first aspects are robot related, they are the central ones, and then human related factors and environmental factors. And in the context of robot related factors, they distinguish between performance-based factors, factors that are relevant that relate to the performance of the robot, kind of the reliability, predictability, level of automation, dependability. And then they have a category attribute-based factors like the robot personality, the personality we ascribe to robot, the adaptability, the robot type, and the anthropomorphism, the way they are, the technology, the robots are similar to human, have human-like characteristics. And then there are human-related factors like it depends on the human users, the personality traits, or the attitudes users have towards robots, how comfortable they are with using robots, and then also the broader environment plays a role. But factors related to robots are really central, and I think it's remarkable these attribute-based aspects play a role. That's why I've put together this next slide where you can see Pepper robot on right and a social bot, where this idea of anthropomorphic characteristic and the factor that these anthropomorphic characteristics play a role for us trusting technology play a huge role. You all know these studies of people having calls with social bots where they think they are humans, and also with social robots. This idea of trust, but also of overtrust plays a role. Don't we trust too much in these technology? Don't we assume too much? Don't we think they are human? They are too much human-like. Don't we put too much trust in them? Overtrust is a kind of key term here. There have been studies on overtrust in emergency evacuation situations where people where an emergency situation was simulated and it was proven that or it was the study results showed that people tended to put really too much trust in a Pepper style robot. Even if the robot told them, oh, I'm out of function, they would still do what the robot would have suggested to do. So there is a real problem here, and anthropomorphic features do seem to play a huge role in this kind of trust, overtrust scenario. So, oh yeah, and then there's this study I found by Saunderson and Najat that made they had a very nice study about robots persuading humans and what are the factors that are relevant for robots persuading humans. They did the study with 2 narrow robots, and they had this jelly bean game, and the game was for the participants to guess how many jelly beans are in this jar. And the 2 robots, they would make suggestions, kind of like, and they would have verbal and nonverbal behavior and things. They would say like, it would make me happy if you used my guess of, let's say, 300 jelly beans in the jar. And the other robot would say, you would be an idiot if you didn't take my guess of 500 jelly beans. And then the research would try to find out in how far these robots have been able to persuade the human participants, in how far there was an influence. And I think this was a remarkable study. The results weren't really conclusive, but emotional appeals or appeals to logic seem to have been the most persuasive ones. Yeah, I mean, some critical thoughts on this. What would it mean upon reflection to be persuaded by a robot? I mean, it's not a robot that would persuade us. It's the humans behind the robot, those who deploy the robot, develop whatever. In how far is there deception involved? yeah, what is the type of influence? There are a lot of questions. And again, trust in robots over trust. I mean, what could this be? This idea of how should a robot try to persuade the person in this context? So all of this is kind of the introduction to the idea that this pure idea of trust and is not a good concept, because we trust in all, obviously in technology, because it has human-like features, or it seems human-like to us. It seems reliable to us, but it doesn't really have to be. And against this background, I think it's this idea of trustworthy AI is really one that is very interesting, so not trust or not trust, over trust, not trust, but trustworthiness. And this is a concept that has been put forward by the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence, put together by the European Commission. They developed ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI that were published in 2019. And in what follows, I would like to talk about these guidelines, because these guidelines are sort of the basis of the assessment process that this international group of researchers is developing. So here are the guidelines. And the idea is, when would AI be trustworthy? What are criteria for AI to be trustworthy, worthy of us trusting the technology? And they begin with quite general thoughts, like, in order to be trustworthy, the technology has to be lawful, ethical, and robust, both from a technical perspective and from a societal perspective. And it has to be throughout the system's entire life cycle, so right from the start. And by the way, these ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, they could also be seen like ethics guidelines for trustworthy technology in general. I mean, you'll see that they are pretty general. So, and then what those guidelines are about, basically, this high-level expert group, they developed, or they stress 4 ethical pillars that they consider relevant, and related to those ethical pillars, they develop key requirements that they consider relevant for trustworthy AI. And those ethical pillars, those central ethical concepts, would be respect for human autonomy, prevention of harm, fairness, and explicability. Those of you who are familiar with applied ethics, these ethical pillars are very closely connected to the 4 Beecham-Childress principles that were developed in the context of biomedical ethics. There would be respect for human autonomy, fairness. Instead of prevention of harm, it would be non-maleficence. And in the medical context, the 4th principle would be beneficence. And here, the 4th principle has been exchanged for explicability, because this plays a huge role in the context of AI. And so this is kind of related to a principle-based approach. Principlism, we can discuss about this later if people are interested in this. And related to those ethical pillars, the group suggests 7 key requirements for trustworthy AI. The first one would be human agency and oversight. The second, technical robustness and safety. The third, privacy and data governance. The 4th, transparency. Then diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. And in what follows, I have a slide for each one of those key requirements, because before I talk about the assessment process that the group is developed. So the first one, human agency and oversight. So they begin with a need to respect fundamental human rights. And then human agency is really about humans being the central agents in this context. On the one hand, there's a clear need to provide users with adequate knowledge and tools that enable users to make informed, autonomous decisions. So not to kind of blur the context, but that there are really well-informed decisions possible. And the second one, which is also a pretty fundamental idea, that AI systems should support users in making better, more informed choices, which kind of requires general knowledge about the overall context, so that humans are the agents and not kind of those who just follow what the technology does. And then human oversight, the idea of humans being in control what the system does, the capability for human intervention, human in the loop, human on the loop are kind of central terms here. So the fundamental idea here is to strengthen human autonomy and decision making. The second requirement for trustworthy AI would be technical robustness and safety, the need for the system to be resilient against attack and to be safe, to be protected against hacking, security plans in place, the need for fallback plans and general safety, that in case of problems, there are safeguards in place. Accuracy is central, that the technology is capable of making correct judgment, correct classifications, recommendations, predictions, whatever. Reliability, that the system is capable of performing in a wide range of situations with a wide range of inputs and reproducibility. You may say these are all kind of technical aspects. Yes, they are, but it's also about preventing harm in case of something goes wrong. The third requirement, privacy and data governance, privacy and data protection throughout the entire life cycle of the system, which is about the protection of information provided by the user, and also about the protection of information generated about the user during interaction, quality and integrity of data, avoid inaccuracies, bias, errors, whatever in data sets, and access to data. Also, there have to be protocols in place to specify who can access the data and when. So general questions around privacy and data governance. The fourth requirement, transparency. We've talked about this already. The group makes this distinction between three aspects. They call it traceability, the need to document the data set, to document basically the entire process of the system, the data sets, where the data is coming from, the processes that yield the system's decision and the decision. So they call this traceability, in contrast to explainability, the ability to explain the technical processes of the system and the related human decisions. And they have a very interesting aspect of communication here in the context of transparency, stressing that there is a clear need to transparently communicate about the system's capabilities and limitations, so that people know what the system is actually capable of doing and not doing. And an interesting point, I think, about communication, they say AI systems must be identifiable as technology and should not represent themselves as humans to users. So this is kind of, this relates to the social bots I mentioned earlier. The next requirement, diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness, is about avoiding unfair bias, both in data sets and in algorithms, which you may be aware of. This facial recognition technology is a good example of this, where the data sets used to build the technology were biased, in the sense that they were primarily built by images of white men, and women were less represented, and people with other skin types were less represented, which led to the fact that the systems were able to best detect white men, but had a lot of difficulties with Black women, and a lot of problems that arised here. Accessibility and universal design, accessibility for persons with disabilities, accessible for everyone, and they stress the need for stakeholder participation, the need to include stakeholders in the design process and to get regular feedback from stakeholders. Here's the general principle of fairness that is central. Societal and environmental well-being, the need to consider the system's resource uses and energy consumption. I think that's an important point that is often neglected, and also to aim to develop systems that they say address areas of global concerns. They have this sustainable development goals in mind, but I think that's an important aspect to stress. And then when it comes to societal well-being, they make the point of the impact of social AI systems, of social robots, of social media, social networks on individual, and that there are potential negative effects on our relationships, social relationships, mental well-being, mental health in general, and that this has to be considered, as well as under the headline society and democracy, effects on society, societal institutions at large. They think of negative effects on interferences with elections or similar institutions. The last one, accountability. A system has to be auditable. It has to be possible to assess the algorithms, data, and design processes. The system has to be in place. Processes have to be in place to report and minimize negative impacts, and process has redress. Processes have to be in place in order to allow redress. And one aspect that the entire document stresses are the trade-offs, because obviously there are a lot of different requirements, different factors that are supposed to be considered, but obviously tensions may arise between all of these factors. And these tensions are inevitable, and there have to be, people have to think about what happens when these tensions arise. There has to be a rational, they say, rational and methodological way of addressing these tensions. But obviously this is a huge problem. There are all these principles, requirements, and how to deal with tensions. So these are those 7 key requirements and the 4 ethical pillars. And I don't know what you think about it. The problem really is that this is a little bit like a check box, like checking boxes. There are all these principles. Yeah, it's true. We have to consider them all. They are all really relevant, but how are we supposed to do this? I mean, that's a problem. So far, these are just general ethical concepts, central ethical concepts. They are really important ones, but how can they be applied to technology, to an AI system? And that's the huge problem here, because they are abstract principles, but how can they be converted into actionable recommendations? Because each and every AI system is different, has a different context, is used in a different domain. And it's here where our group, our international interdisciplinary group comes in. It's called the Zyed Inspection Initiative. Roberto Sicari is the initiator of this, and I've basically, this is a screenshot of homepage, zyedinspection.org, where a lot of materials have been collected, where there's a lot of information about the group. And the idea behind is to kind of find a way to reflect on ethical and societal implications of AI technology based on these ethics guidelines, and to do this with specific use cases. So to have specific use cases that the group analyzes and reflects, okay, what could transparency mean in this context? What could be the role of privacy in this context? Because obviously it doesn't help to just say privacy or transparency. We have to think about what does it mean in the respective context. And the group does this by thinking about the social technical scenarios about the respective use cases. So let's say we think about a certain AI technology deployment. I'll give you examples later. And then we think about, okay, how is this system used? What is the aim of the system? What are the aims of the systems of the system? Who are the actors who are involved? Who are the developers? Who are the users? Who is involved? What are their expectations? How do the actors interact? What is the role of the system in these interactions? And in which contexts can the system be used? And then we talk about these the various actors, the various roles. We build up these social technical scenarios, and we think about, okay, what are positive aspects of how the system is going to work, to function, and what are potential ethical issues. And the next step is to identify these ethical issues and to describe them, to talk about, okay, here could be a problem with the data provided by people, or if the system is not transparent, nobody understands how the system works. This would be something like an ethical issue, and we try to specify this with the experts in the group, with a computer scientist, with a philosophers, with whoever is part of the group. And then we try to, in a second step, to map these issues to some of these ethical pillars and requirements I have mentioned in the ethical guidelines. This is kind of where the ethical guidelines come in, because they give kind of a, on the one hand, you can say it's a check, it's kind of checking boxes, but on the other hand, they really give an overview of aspects that are relevant or that could be relevant in the context of AI. And then the third step is to identify tensions between these issues, because, for example, a system that is more transparent may be less reliable or whatever. There may be tensions between these principles, and these tensions may even be inevitable. So we'll see what it depends on the respective case. And it's important to explicitly acknowledge these trade-offs, that there's no solution that is a one super best solution, but that there are trade-offs that we have to evaluate those trade-offs. And yes, if no ethically acceptable trade-offs can be identified, maybe the system shouldn't be deployed in the way it's supposed to be deployed. Maybe changes should be. And here's a sort of overview of the assessment process. We could say the assess phase. The first one, as I said, is the creation of those social technical scenarios, and to analyze what are the scenarios. The second then is to think about the ethical issues, also technical and legal issues play a role here, and to describe them in open vocabulary. And then the third step is to map them to those ethical principles and requirements. And the fourth step is important too, to kind of verify the claims, because often it's like we start with certain claims, and then after having had several discussions, we realize, oh no, the claim was that the goal of the system is X, but now we realize, no, the goal of the system is Y, and then we have to do the same thing again. So there are a number of iterations, basically, of this assessment process. Are necessary. And ideally, the output would be to give recommendations, to make suggestions about what could be appropriate use of the system, what can be done to limit ethical issues, what can be done to limit ethical tensions, what are ways to mitigate the risks. So basically we think about what positive feedback could we give to those to the owners of the use case, to those who have provided their AI for basically for assessment. Okay, so this is the general context, and I've been involved in this group for more than 2 years now, and I've been involved in 3 case studies, basically in 4, but 3 have been published so far. And now I want to give you specific examples of what we did. So one of the studies we did, the first one, co-design of a trustworthy AI system in healthcare, deep learning-based skin lesion classifier. This was about a machine learning system that is under development, that aims to detect skin melanoma. So our examples are all or the 3 examples I mentioned are in healthcare. So this was something that the group was just about to develop the system, and we could give them some positive feedback on how they might modify this, or what could be done to better think about the design. For example, they thought about developing the system in a way that, on the one hand, it may help medical doctors in the diagnosis of melanoma, and on the other hand, to develop an app for us to kind of check our skin and see whether we can detect melanoma. And they realized that the app may be a good idea, but for now it's too complicated. There are too many issues involved. The second case study we did was in the COVID-19 context, assessing trustworthy AI in times of COVID-19, deep learning for predicting a multi-regional score conveying the degree of lung compromise in COVID-19 patients. This was about a machine learning system to kind of, based on chest X-rays, developed a way to evaluate the extent to which the patient's lungs were compromised. And the third case I want to talk about more today is on assessing trustworthy AI in healthcare, machine learning as a supportive tool to recognize cardiac arrest in emergency calls. So this is a case from the city of Copenhagen, and it's about health-related emergency calls, about 112 calls, and that are part of the emergency medical dispatch center of the city of Copenhagen. The problem for the city of Copenhagen and the emergency medical dispatch center is, or has been, that they have failed to identify approximately a quarter of the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest cases. So 25% of those who have called because someone had a cardiac arrest, the medical dispatch center wasn't able to recognize this. And the problem is that whenever someone calls as a bystander, because basically the patient is kind of lifeless, is not breathing anymore, unconscious, there's a really strict time factor. There's a need to immediately start cardiopulmonary resuscitation in order for the patient to have a chance to survive. So when someone calls 112 and says, oh, there's a patient, they are laying there, they are not breathing anymore, the dispatcher will have to immediately tell the caller, okay, start cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And obviously this has to be done only in those cases where where there is really a considerable chance of an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, because otherwise you may hurt the patient, that other problems may arise. So this was the situation, and in this in this context, an AI tool was developed with a goal to help the medical dispatchers identify those cases, because those patients, those cases that were not identified, the patients died, and with cardiopulmonary resuscitation, they would have at least have had a chance to survive. And this was the AI tool with a goal to kind of react very fast and help the medical dispatchers identify those cases, so that they could instruct the callers to start cardiopulmonary resuscitation immediately and don't lose time. So this is basically a figure for the social technical scenario. Here you see the patient lying on the floor, the caller with a cell phone calling 112, and then in the middle you see the medical dispatcher, and here you see this kind of round thing. This would basically be the eye that listens to what basically listens to the phone call, and if the system assumes that there's a cardiac arrest, it would kind of blink, it would send an alarm, and the dispatcher would then have to decide whether they rely on what the system says and kind of instruct the caller to do cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or maybe not, maybe think this is false alarm. In the picture, the dispatcher advises the caller to start cardiopulmonary resuscitation and to send an ambulance to the address. So this is basically the picture of the social technical scenario and the interaction between those various actors around the system. So the system, this is a slide. Wait a second. The system listens to what listens to the phone call, and the system was trained with recorded phone calls from a few years ago. The system was trained, and there was a retrospective study that showed that the system was capable of detecting those out-of-hospital cardiac arrests in a higher degree, more often than the medical dispatchers, but that it was less specific. So the problem was that it basically more often sounded the alarm than in reality the patients really suffered from out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And also one of the problems certainly is that this is a black box. We talked about this black box problem. The dispatchers, they don't know how the system comes up with its decision. They only see the alarm, and then they are confronted with, okay, do I believe the system or not? Do I think this is correct? And we discussed quite a bit around this, and you can read the details in the paper. I don't want to talk too long. But among the ethical issues we discussed are these. How does the AI tool influence the calls and the dispatcher's decision making? Because there is a clear tension between the dispatchers just doing what the system says and just following the system, and the dispatchers ignoring the system. So it's kind of open for what should they do. And again, central, do the dispatchers trust the system? Of course, the more they trust the system, the more they would follow what the system says. A clear problem there is lack of transparency. How does the AI tool come up with its decision? This is really a huge problem here. And another ethical issues are the de-skilling risks. For the more that dispatchers rely on the system, the more it will contribute to a reduction in their own competencies, because obviously the more they have to learn this. I mean, imagine new dispatchers joining the team. They won't really learn this anymore, but they will just rely on the system. And I have to say another thing. The problem is also there are lots of 112 calls, but only a very small percentage of those 112 calls is really these out of hospital cardiac arrests. I think it's 0.3% or so. So it's really a very small number. It's not like these calls happen all the time. And actually, the real question, what are the medical benefits and risks of the system? Is there an increased survival rate? So will more patients be detected, and will they have an increased survival chance? Because this is really the central output here. And what is the role of false positive and false negative results? We really discussed very long about this, because the system was has had a higher sensitivity but less specificity, which means that there were a lot of false positive, not a lot, but a relatively high amount of false positive results, at least a higher amount of false positive results than the medical dispatchers would have produced, which kind of means like they start cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or if they would follow the system, they would start cardiopulmonary resuscitation in cases where it's not needed. They would send an ambulance out in a lot of cases, and these ambulances are then not available for other 112 cases anymore. So there is a clear issue around resource distribution here. Another ethical issue, do the callers know about the role of the AI tool, about the fact that the AI tool is involved at all? I mean, these are 112 calls. You won't just say, oh, you know, this is a 112 call, but we are kind of doing research and investigating the role of this. You lose too much time, so they wouldn't have had a chance to let anybody know that they are basing their that they have this AI tool in place, which of course in the long run would be a problem, because with regard to informed consent, I mean, callers should know that an AI tool is used to assess the 112 calls, and there would policies would be needed somehow to secure informed consent, or they should publicize this somehow. Then questions around data protection certainly would have to be resolved. Then there's a clear risk of bias, because which is the kind of non-discrimination fairness aspect, because the system was developed by listening to the calls of I think year 2014 or so, which with a high level of Danish-speaking people, white people. But the problem is that the system now has problems to understand non-Danish speakers, has problems understanding dialects. So someone who calls who speaks English, this will run into issues here. So there certainly is a requirement to train the system with larger, more diverse data sets to avoid bias. And about I mean, this is research in process. They are just developing the system, but then they did a clinical study and found out, yeah, basically the patient survival rate didn't increase. They didn't detect more out-of-patient cardiac arrest cases, even though the AI tool is capable of having has a higher sensitivity and should be able to detect more. So it's not just the tool, it's also the question of how the dispatchers are interacting with the tool. And they don't have a study about this yet, but obviously it plays a role how the dispatchers react to the system. And if or when the dispatchers ignore the system, it doesn't help the system kind of like blinking. And obviously there is a sort of translation problem here. And I mean, there's the case owner, they don't know what the reason is so far, but even though the system has been in place for a while now, the number of patients they identify hasn't increased yet. So they will have to think about how to increase the acceptance of what the factors are that play a role here, that they weren't able to detect more out of hospital cardiac arrests. I think this was the last slide about the case. And just to conclude, to kind of wrap up what I said, so there is this tension between trust and overtrust. And so far, I think trustworthiness really is a suitable criterion that could be helpful here. In general, AI assessment tools are needed. There's a need for validated products, and I think the satisfaction group that is developing an assessment process for trustworthy AI has a good approach that could be helpful in assessing AI in the future, the social and ethical implications of AI, and could help develop validated products in the future. Yeah, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. To questions and to your
before we move to the discussion, there is one question in the chat, and the question say, can maybe just a clarification that you address now, if you can provide a better explanation of technical robustness. It was at the beginning when you presented the
yes, she presented some more details later on.
Yeah,
really.
I am aware of this, that this was a bit confusing. Technical robustness is here, and I tried to distinguish between resilience against hacking, that general safety against hacking, having a fallback plan, robustness in the sense of accuracy, kind of making correct, being accurate, and being reliable in the sense of being capable of functioning in a broad range of situations with a wide range of inputs, and being reproducible. This is kind of how I try to explain this in line with what those experts write in the document, ethical guidelines of trustworthy AI. But I am aware that there could be different definitions of technical robustness. And
we can also add the resilience to noisy data and also to fuzzy data. Because it's very important to know when you have a data set, it's in this list of the different points defining the robustness, because we have different definition of robustness about the attack, but also the robustness, as I'm using the term of technical robustness, is most this point, the accuracy, what I call the predictive performance, the real performance of your predictive models. And this is directly linked to the quality of the data. If your model is unable to handle noisy data or to handle new data, new situations, giving you a bad decision for new situations, then we say that robustness is very bad, very low. So this is something that we can add to your list of.
Sure. I mean, this is an overview of this EU document by the high-level expert group, and I kind of provided additional explanations. I'm aware that technical robustness is really, from a technical perspective, is a much broader.
Reproducibility from the mathematical point of view, we call it the determinism, the determinism of the system. Same situation, same decision.
Maybe you want to be here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Zyed, for your presentation. Very clear. I would like to add something, because you are talking about a document that was published in 2019, and in 2021, the 21st of April of last year, the proposal of a new regulation called the AI Act was published by the European Commission. And mainly when we talk about the proof of or the assessment of the trust that we have toward an AI system is mainly focused on what we call the high-risk AI application. As I said to my students and to the different attendees to my conferences, if you are Netflix and you want to use your black box model in order to recommend me my best TV series for tonight, it's not a problem, because if your system made a wrong decision, I will not die. And it's not the same case if you are developing, as Tesla did it and is doing it, which is a wrong decision in my point of view, to use a black box model in order to pilot a car. Because one wrong decision and you will have a death or a wounded people, which is also the case for the healthcare systems. Healthcare systems, a wrong decision and you have a death or a wounded people. So for this high-risk situation, it's mandatory, in my point of view, to use a white box model and not a black box model. Because when I saw the different application and the application of your approach, every time you are assessing black box models for the healthcare, black box model to detect cancers. I'm also focusing on using Extractis, the augmented AI, augmented fuzzy AI system that I developed since more than 20 years ago. What we want to do is to have a system on which we can trust, as you said. And if you want to trust a high-risk AI system, you have to know how the system is making its decisions. So you have to know, you have to make explicit the entire internal logical decision logical system, decision logics. In my point of view, it's impossible to do it with a black box model, and so I prefer to develop white box models. In my for Extractis, it will be a white box system composed of a list of fuzzy rules. Fuzzy means continuous logic. We don't use a binary logic, but a continuous logic proposed for the first time by Jan Lukasiewicz in 1920 to solve some problems with quantum physics. Because in quantum physics, you know, we can be and not be at the same time. It could be yes and true at the same time. So we have to extend the logics proposed by Aristotle to a continuous logic. And in order to develop a white box model, it's possible to do it with your brain. It's exactly what we do since the beginning of the 11th century. It's what we call the inductive reasoning. But our brain, even if our brain is composed of 100 millions of neurons, 100 billions of neurons, 100 billions of neurons, it's impossible to make a conscious reasoning with more than 10 dimensions, 10 variables at the same time, consciously. You see, so our brain is very limited. Even if you have an exceptional IQ of 200, which is very, very rare, you will not be able to make a conscious decision with more than 10 dimensions at the same time. Unconsciously, you can make a decision, an automatic decision with the 12. An artist which is specializing in a piano will use 10 fingers and 2 fit in order to make his music or her music partition. And so what I wanted to do is to make the inductive reasoning automatic, an automatic inductive reasoning by robots, and the output is a list of knowledge, a list of rules which are totally transparent. And so the problem of the auditing and the certification of such systems will become very easy because we have the rules and we can prove something which is important, the formal stability of such systems. When we try to assess, just for your information, when you try to assess the stability of a black box, it's impossible to do it, because what we can do is to make the explanation of how the system has made its decision in a point A by a local linear approximation of the hidden nonlinear function. So you can explain by a linear equation how the black box system has made its decision. You can explain with another equation, linear equation, how your hidden nonlinear function has made its decision. But how about the infinity of points between A and B? You haven't the possibility to extract an infinity of linear equations. So you have the possibility to prove formally the stability of your system. If you are making a high-risk decision, it will be impossible to prove that your system is stable. So, as I said, do you accept to be driven by autonomous vehicle, which would say, trust on me? In 95% of the situations when I will have to brake, I will brake. You will not accept it. You want to be sure that in 100% of the situation when the system has to brake, it will brake. And this is my opinion, personal opinion. I'm defending and promoting another approach of AI, a symbolic AI, which is the other camp, because we are talking today about the connectionist approach invented in 1956. But at the same time, in August 1956, we had another camp which was facing the other camp, the cognitivism AI. The cognitivist AI, which is fighting against the connectionist AI. Connectionist AI, the main objective was to model the perception of the human. It's exactly what you see. The main applications of neural networks is to model the perception, human perception. So the automatic, unconscious decision made by a human being. I'm focusing on the reasoning, and the reasoning is made by our prefrontal cortex, which is here. The automatic decision is made here, automatically at the rear of our brain. And when you want to model the reasoning, you have to manipulate, to handle explicit knowledge. So in our case, our nonlinear equations are based on rules. A fuzzy rule is a nonlinear equations. So I'm very happy to listen to Professor Hildt about the necessity of assessing black box models. And in my approach with when I'm confronted with to a black box model, the first step, what I'm doing in order to assess this black box model is to use another approach. I'm doing the white box reverse engineering of a black box model, thanks to extractives. So I have a black box model, a black box model. I will ask my black box model to give me its decision on a specific situation, its decision on another situation, another situation, asking it to give me its decision without having to explain to me how it makes its decision. It doesn't know how it makes its decision because it doesn't handle knowledge. And when I get a complete data set, I use the black box model as a generator of synthetic response, synthetic data set. I launch extractives on this data set, and I ask extractives to do the reverse engineering of this black box brain, if you want, this unconscious brain. It's exactly the same for the human being. And by its inductive reasoning, Extractis is able to say to me, first, it's a bad system. It's not robust at all. I didn't find any robust model. So the virtual expert is not with a high skilled expert. And the second option is it's nice. And I found a robust model, and here is the different rules that are used by your black box model in order to make a decision. And then I assess the white box model. So this is the approach that I'm using operationally, as I said, because Extractis is more than 19 years. I invented here, and it was operational in 2003, and it is used for autonomous vehicles. For the last project accepted by the European Commission is to embed Extractis to pilot automatically satellites, because it's high risk applications, and you haven't the possibility to embed black box systems for high risk applications. So it's what I wanted to say to you in order to complete this beautiful presentation of Professor Hildt, in order to say it's a very important point. It's a very important issue in AI. And I said in my previous comments about your beautiful master of AI, because I have two, my son and Heigl is a student in Schema, and also my daughter is a student in Schema. And I said, very nice that a Schema school, business school, will learn to each student, to each of its students, AI, initiation to AI, or more deep information about AI. But please, don't say to your students that the best and the unique way to do AI is the black box neural networks, which is not the case, because Extractis is able also to provide you with a predictive system with the accuracy at least the same as the neural networks, the random forest, or the boosted trees, which are the three main challenges of Extractis, because in order to model complex systems, you have to rely on very nonlinear techniques, and these four techniques are very nonlinear techniques. So it's exactly what I wanted to say to the professors and also to the students. Thank you very much, Professor Hildt, for your beautiful conference, and thank you very much, Professor Pagani, to invite me to give you some information. Maybe next time I will give you a masterclass about my new. Yes.
See, because I'm not finished. I will be Elisabeth if you want to join the video, because there are two chairs, and now we can listen the question by the audience here and the audience online. So
may I say, this white box approach is a really great solution or way to solve the transparency issue. Isn't it the fourth one? Transparency.
Exactly.
This is really, and this is really central. I mean, without doubt.
And you say another point, please. Also, I would like to add something, because you say with the emergency system, which is very interesting. You said that it will reduce the competences of the guy that is using the system. But we reduce the competences because the guy or the man or the woman who's using the system has no information about the knowledge which is inside the box. The box, because the box is a white box model. If we present to the field expert the different rules automatically discovered by Extractis, you will have an augmentation of the competences, because the expert will have the possibility to access to a knowledge that was totally unknown for him or for her. And as I said, with Extractis, the PhD will be done on experimental science in 1 year, not 3 years. Our human brain will pose the problem. Our human brain will gather the information, and the solution will be given to you by your exobrain, what I call my exobrain. So it's a cooperation between my human brain and my exobrain in order to solve complex systems. And if there is no solution to your problem, meaning that there is no information inside your data set, Extractis will tell you, sorry, but I haven't the possibility to find a solution. So you have to avoid 3 years of your life to try to find something which doesn't exist, which is very important. Yeah.
So let's start with the discussion. There was Barbara, and then we pass.
Go ahead. You raise your hand first.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, thank you for this interesting presentation. I have a question for the philosopher. In 2018, in the north of the United States, close to the Canadian frontier, a woman ended up in a lake with her car, and she said, well, I was only following the GPS.
Yeah.
It was a waste, by the way. And why do we trust so much the artificial intelligence? From you, is it due to our education, due to the fact that the machine beats the best chess player or Go gamer or something like that? How do you explain that?
That's a good question. I really have not really thought about it, but yeah, I mean, I think maybe with a car, and there are other examples. I know in Germany there was another one in the River Rhine where there was no bridge. Oh, yeah. Maybe we don't ourselves know, which direction, and then if or when there's someone who tells us, oh, go left or go right, maybe we just rely on this or tend to rely on this because we think they know better because they tell us, and it's a human-like voice in those systems. I'm not sure what the role of this is. Maybe we trust because most often we can trust. If that's the thing, like in 98% of cases, I mean, there are a few cases where cars fell into rivers or lakes or so, but most cars don't fall. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, what do you think? Why do we trust technology? Maybe we are used to it too. I mean, our laptops, we open them every day, turn them on, and then it works.
Do you think that we should learn to students to don't trust too much? Somewhere. Or to have a critical eye on it.
I would say
to come back to what Mr. said, to have a critical eye on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say to think about the criteria that we use for trusting, whether we have reasons to trust, whether we really whether they are trustworthy. But I agree with you that, I mean, a technology, whatever it is, be it our cell phone or whatever, we can't really go through all of these principles and criteria all the time. But I think it would be good if the companies would stick to these principles, and if we knew that in general, or if we know that privacy is respected, for example, and the trust depends on what plays an important role is the functionality, isn't that it functions correctly and these things. It would be good to know that companies, developers stick to these concepts, or how they stick to these concepts. No details. Anyway, the anthropomorphic features, they shouldn't be the reasons why we trust in them. I mean, that's something I would try to stress. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, you raised the question.
I don't have the answer. I was wondering.
Yeah.
The trust is built by 2 points. I think that the first is the right decisions made by your system, and the second to trust the knowledge used by your system in order to make its decision. As I said, when you have a white box model, which is for example, in medicine, we have decision system predictive. I'm very focused on healthcare, but not only on the healthcare. In order to prevent the onset of cancers, for example, when you prevent the onset of cancers, you have the possibility to survive. And when it is too late, generally you have metastasis, and you become the best client of the big pharma with 200 kilo euros per year per patient. So it's very, very, very costly. And you have no chance to survive, generally 5 years or 3 years, and after we die. So if we have a system which is totally what I'm talking about, I make a distinction between intelligibility and explainability. Intelligibility means that I put on the table the 20 rules which have been discovered in order to prevent the onset of cancers, of prostate cancer. We have only 4 rules. 4 rules for prostate cancer. You have the use case on the extractist side. 4 rules and 7 genes out of the 25,517 genes composing our genome. So you have the 4 rules. Imagine that you are a student in medicine for your PhD, and you want to train yourself on different situations. I propose to you different genomes of different patients, and I said to you, please, student, would you have the possibility to give me the right diagnosis based on the genome, or the genetic analysis? You will say, okay, it's a cancer, it's not a cancer. And as you are my student, I will try to explain not your black box brain, but your white box brain. Please explain to me the reasoning, the deductive reasoning that you have used in order to decide that it is a cancer or not a cancer. And you will say, okay, it's a cancer, and here is my reasoning. And you will be able to check with your exobrain in order to see if it is right or not, because the extractive system will be able also to give you the right decision and to give you the reasoning that it has used in order to make its decision. So you are augmenting your competences because you have your professor with you 24-hour days. At this time, my 750 extractist robots are doing inductive reasoning 24-hour days, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Robots means slave. They are my scientist slaves. Scientists slaves, exactly.
May I add something? I mean, the problem with trust is that we normally, let's assume we as humans make decisions. I mean, our decisions are not always correct too, isn't it? We may make wrong decisions too, and the system may have a, let's say, 98% correct decision thing. I mean, there are those 4 rules. In reality, there may be, let's say, 20, and the system only uses 4 rules because, let's say, in 98% of cases, the right result will show up. And it's tricky because with humans, we also know that none of us always makes the right decision, isn't? And still we trust each other, at least in part, or to a certain extent, or it depends on a lot of factors. And this, do you remember those definitions I had on the slide? Were not very specific, and there are a lot of factors play a role. How long we know each other, that normally the advice is good one, things like that. And maybe there are similar reasons why we trust an AI system. Let's say 98% is not perfect, but maybe it's okay normally, or I mean, yeah.
I just want to point out something else. High risk doesn't mean death or wounded people. High risk means also discriminatory decision, which is clearly explained in the AI Act. Means that in your domain, the management, suppose that you want to automate the decision made by your human resource director, okay? And so you have a data set, you have the definition of the different the candidates and the characteristics of the different candidates, and the decision made by your HR director. So hired, not hired, or accepted for the interview, etc., etc. And if you launch the deep learning on this data set, you will have a model which will work very well, no problem if the data set has enough information. And you will say, okay, I'm very pleased with the performance, with the accuracy of my system. But what did you do? You have modeled the decision making of your director, the HR director. And do you know if your director is racist or not racist? And if your director is racist, if surname is Zyed, Mohammed, Sarah, not hired, it's totally criminally condemned by the judge, you know. So by using an approach which is able to induce, it's exactly the term, to discover the rules of the unconscious decision making of the HR director, you will have the rules. And if some of these rules are discriminatory, you will say, guys, I have my job, I've done my job, but there is a problem here. You know, the bias in the data sets. So I detect the bias in the data sets thanks to the induction, not afterwards.
Okay. Barbara?
Thank you both. Thank you, Professor Hildt. I had a couple of questions for you, I really enjoyed the presentation. I haven't read the paper, the one that you presented, the case, but I'll start with a more specific clarification question, which is what was the problem that the dispatchers were facing? Why did AI was required? Because I find that sometimes we also try to put AI where there's no need for AI, in the sense that could they be trained instead, you know, and be able to respond? So that's the first question. And the second one is a broader question, because I do think so we've been doing technology assessment for what, 40 years, more than 40 years now, since the 70s. And we have a lot of experience with technology assessment in the field of the biotechnology, also nanotechnology. And I would think that for the difficulties in assessing uncertainty, it's one of the things that have kept a lot of these emerging technologies from actually upscaling and being deployed in society. Whereas with AI, we have something completely different. It's like it's a live experiment. We're doing it, we're using it, we're deploying it before we actually we are able to understand what the impacts could be, or to understand uncertainty. So my question for you, the broader one, is: do we have the right frameworks today for assessing technologies? The frameworks that we developed 20 years ago that we used for all the technologies, for something like AI and the way it's being deployed and decentralized. So yeah, those are my two questions.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, the first one is a good question. And I mean, I joined the team when there was this AI in place. But yes, for sure, you can ask, do we need an AI at all here? And that's a fair question, because if we think of it, I think 0.3% of cases are really about out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. We could ask, is it worth it? Why should we use an AI system? And that's a fair question. I don't know why they thought this was a good idea, but I think that's a fair question. And I think we tend to also...
so no, it's maybe a marketing aspect to say, well, we are using AI, so we are in the trend.
Yeah, and we may tend to try to solve all sorts of problems with technology because it's just in there. Maybe I mean, there may be funding, or it's kind of on the other hand, so this could be a reason. On the other hand, you could say, okay, this could be a model for similar cases, and maybe this could be a model also for other contexts. insofar this could be seen as research, but I agree that why do we need an AI system here at all?
I mean, but that's just the case. My
Yeah.
question was because for the other example that you had about skin lesions. I
Yeah.
understand the necessity because of the
Yeah,
preciseness of
Yeah.
an AI system.
Yeah.
So, but my question was just
Yeah.
related to that team
Yeah.
of dispatchers, and that is specific.
I think the problem was really that the dispatchers missed the border of the patients, and that these patients immediately died, and probably this is something that makes people think a lot, and this could be the reason. But I was not involved in this, and I can see your question. And the second one, yeah, it's true. I have been thinking of this too for a while, that with AI technology, people are more willing to accept that there are certain things that are unclear, that we don't know, that we have been in the context of other technology. And also that there is an increased willingness. This is something different, but it's along your line, kind of saying, oh yeah, this is technology. People talk of a relational turn and kind of building relations with technology, and there's an increased willingness to adopt this technology into our lives, to build positive connections, even though there's a lot we don't know about it, and a much higher inclination to do this than we have been having around other contexts. We would never, I mean, let's say this tendency of considering social robots our companions, kind of like building friendships, relationships with this technology. I don't know, but if I talked about trying to build a relationship with a tree or something, people would say, oh, she's crazy. But at least this is a living organism. I don't know, there's really some discrepancy, and probably also about the risk. Maybe with newer technology, the problem is that there's a direct connection with the human body and the human brain, and this technology is kind of AI technology often is outside of our bodies, and so far we may say, okay, there is a certain uncertainty, but if you are aware of it, you can still decide whether you want to use it or not. On the other hand, we have to accept that this is technology in the making, that this is going to improve. But I see your point, and I think it's a very fundamental one. We seem to be willing to accept risks and all sorts of contexts that we have not been willing to in the past with other technology.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to add something to your first question. I think that I saw on the slide presented by Professor Hildt for the emergency situation that there is a 25% of wrong decision.
Yeah.
If thanks to an AI you reduce this number of 25 to 10, you will save people.
You can do that as well by training the responders.
Yeah,
My question was which
yeah,
one do
for
you
sure,
want to
but sometimes it's not a problem of
Yeah.
training. Sometimes it's a problem of the availability.
Maybe,
of the,
yeah, exactly, yeah,
the
yeah.
cost. The cost. Just for your information, in 2016, in USA, the third reason of medical death is medical errors. Medical errors, not a medical disease. Medical errors. So if we know that starting from mycin, the first AI system used in medicine for the detection of blood diseases, blood infections, the first benchmark was done, 65% of accuracy for mycin. It was an expert system with binary rules, 600 binary rules, very big system, and they did a benchmark with 5 doctors trained in the same university, Stanford University. The worst one had 42% of right decision, and the best 62% of right decision. So today we know that when we do benchmark human doctors versus AI, you see that we have a maximum of 70% to 80% for the human and till 90% or higher for the AI. So if we have the possibility to save people, let's do it. Let's do it. You know, it's exactly what I'm doing on the KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to predict the onset of cancers, because cancers are very costly diseases.
I have a question also.
Yes, Ilaria, I'm giving you the word. Just to say that you have just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then you have to close.
Okay.
I know. Thank you so much. I'm Ilaria Dalla Pozza from IPAC Business School in Paris. I have a question on, because Professor Elisabeth, during the presentation, you said that we should identify ethical issue of an AI system. I'm talking with companies now that are implementing AI, and honestly, this is not simple. So the first question is, who should do that? Who should identify this ethical issue in a company implementing AI? So this is the first question. The second one, what I'm seeing, I'm observing is that companies find artificial intelligence difficult, so they are relying more and more on artificial intelligence as a service. What does it mean? They are relying on companies such as Amazon, Google, Microsoft, who provide the cloud, and on the top of that, they provide artificial intelligence services as a package. In such a way, companies don't have to take care of these additional ethical issues. But don't you think that by doing that, if companies are not trained enough, we are going into a world where, I mean, all these big companies, Amazon and Google and Microsoft, will dominate the artificial intelligence world and also competencies? So these are my 2 questions. So I hope it's clear.
Yeah, I mean.
So the first one is, who should check the ethical issue in a company? Which competencies, which people, which profiles?
Yeah, these are really important questions, and there are no easy answers, easy solutions at this point. It's true. I mean, these AI tools are used to help people to make processes less expensive, more efficient, and we may not always be aware of the implications they are bringing. For example, if they are used to hire people, I mean, there are lots of biases here. Yeah, that's a problem, and yeah, there is lack of
There is a lack of
assessment
knowledge.
the implications, and the problem is the systems in businesses, or when they are applied, I mean, they are often trained with existing data, and then there's this bias that you are perpetuating your current situation and not allowing diversification, for example. Yeah, that's a huge problem. There should be some reflection on the output of the tool, and kind of compare it with. Yeah, I mean, I see your point. That's an open question, I would say. Yes, and there's also lack of awareness, because often we don't even know where the issues are. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question, maybe a follow-up on that? So I quickly looked at the paper about the inspection and the IEEE.
Yeah.
You mentioned a medical procedure that you tested the assessment process. For that, for instance, how did you make the hiring of these experts in the process, and also how long this whole process took?
This assessment process.
Yeah, in this implementation you mentioned in the paper. Because,
this IEEE was the COVID case.
No, the inspection paper that introduces the assessment.
Oh yes, yeah, that's a problem. I mean, the right now the assessment takes relatively long time.
Do you remember how long it was?
I mean, with this COVID case, we had a lot of experts from all kinds of fields, and And we are not working on it, 7 days a week or so. We have a meeting, and then let's say 3 weeks later we meet again, and so on. So it took several months.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and it would have to be streamlined. I mean, in order to have this a regular process, it has to be streamlined, and we are working towards this kind of, assigning groups to specific tasks and then combine again, because otherwise the process is too long and burdensome.
To understand better, so in that implementation that you mentioned in the paper, the team of experts were consisting of the group of researchers in this project. Is that it, or did you create a separate expert group to implement?
So the goal is to have for each case study people who can cover the various aspects. So for the melanoma case, there were dermatologists on board, and for other. Pardon?
How do you hire them?
It's not high. They all volunteer. It's the head of the team, Roberto Sicari. He tries to reach out to people, or he asks who do you think can we reach out? But the attempt, the goal is to have all the aspects of the respective case covered. Now we are doing a case about the environment, and there you have totally different group of people, but there are a number of people that kind of continue being part of the project. Computer scientists, you need specialists in machine learning in all sorts of fields, in philosophers, social scientists, you need them in every case. But yeah, those who are part of the team, those who assess the cases, there's some for each case there's different group of people. And a core group, I would say, that kind of continuous working on.
Maybe there's a short last question online. I don't know if Salma, you want to say it out loud, otherwise I can say it. And maybe I'll say it. So what do you think about using AI to amplify the discriminatory bias made in previous human decisions? By making bias visible, it may be easier to question decisions made by a machine than decisions made by a human.
Yeah. With the facial recognition, for example, once it was obvious that there was this bias, there was a clear way to get rid of it, in the sense of having a more balanced data set and having a more and have the system be trained with a more balanced data set, and now facial recognition systems have been improved, or a lot of them have been improved. On the other hand, it's true that when or if a technology does this, there's this clear bias context, and it's not this individual bias that we all bring with us, whether we like, the other person, or whether we have our own biases. And so far, it may help kind of revealing it will help revealing the biases of the technology and trying to minimize them. Probably that's part of the accountability. There was this point about assessing it and trying to minimize negative effects. This could go along those lines.
I prefer to detect biases ex ante.
Yeah,
rather
I
than,
mean, that's a different
post.
approach, of course. I mean, yeah.
The autonomous vehicles in USA do not brake in front when they have a black-skinned pedestrian. But if it is white-skinned, they brake. There is a problem. It's a very big problem, huge problem. And I'm talking about autonomous vehicles, and it's proved. So I prefer to detect these biases before deploying this system.
Yeah, that's the idea throughout the entire life cycle. Yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, there's a lot to improve for sure.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot. Thanks
Thank
to
you
all the
very much. Thank you.
participants. It's an open topic.
Yeah.
Assessing trustworthy AI, we have more question and issue that answer, but thanks a lot for your time, for contributing in this way. I didn't look at if there were other questions, pardon, if any. By the way, we can finish now the seminar, and if you are interested, you can go on in the conversation with Elisabeth or Professor Zyed. So thanks.
Thank you.